Well, welcome back to another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose. It's time to talk some F1 off the back of Miami. It feels like such a long time since we've recapped a race with race cancellations. But we had sprint drama, qualifying headlines, and a main race that was shifted thanks to rain that, well, we're still not quite sure if it actually eventuated. But the big headline, Kimi Antonelli wins again. That is 3 straight Grand Prix wins. He becomes the first driver to convert all 3 of his first pole positions into wins in F1 history. But as always, when we're talking F1, we need one man to join alongside us, and that is JR Carter. JR, good to have you back.
Morning, Chris. How are you?
Going well, mate. It is nice and bright and early as we look to recap this race. The race was pulled forward a little bit earlier, so we'll get into that in a moment. Of course, though, if you do love your F1, make sure to hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel to stay up to date. But there's quite a bit to unpack here. We might move back to the start of the weekend, JR, and start with the sprint race. And things look pretty good for those in Papaya in the sprint race, a 1-2 for McLaren.
It did. Like it was a sort of very different change in fortune for the McLaren guys who were struggling to start races at the start of the year, and now have actually won some stuff. So it was good to see Oscar getting some results in that car as well, since he's been the one that's really been cursed pretty harshly sort of for the beginning of the season. The false champion sort of getting a win. Look, we can cop that. Yeah, good to see a bit of change at like where the Mercedes weren't completely dominant in that regard. That said, though, the Mercedes have had a good weekend as well.
Yeah, well, they certainly haven't. You know, when we looked at this, Charles Leclerc getting on the podium, as we said, Piastri second. It was pretty good to see some things being shared around. In terms of then, we progressed to qualifying, and I guess a little bit of normal transmission resumed as Kimi Antonelli locked in pole. Mercedes looked like they reset after that sprint, I guess, a bit more of a struggle by their standards. McLaren still had some speed. Red Bull weren't dominant, but Max was there again. So a lot of the usual suspects, and settled back to what we've seen pre the break.
It did. So, but it wasn't as dominant a performance by the Mercedes at all, like during qualifying, like where it could have gone either way, like with those cars, the way they were running. But yeah, it ended up settling sort of pretty normal. Although we didn't see a lot of George during qualifying or the race for that matter, to be perfectly honest, where like it seems like Kimi is the one who's really benefiting from how that car's set up at the moment, which again is kind of great to see.
Yeah, it really is good to see. Obviously, the rising of a new star. A lot of people have taken a dislike, yourself included, to a bit of George Russell. So he's certainly not the flavour of the month, alongside another man we'll talk about in a moment, who was probably the only one causing anyone else to crash in this race. And no, it wasn't Lance Stroll. Well, there's a teaser for you. Before we get too far past qualifying and get into the main race, an interesting stat you and I were talking about just before off air. To be fair, the Aston Martins did improve their qualifying for main race qualifying, but they only got one qualifying lap, one qualifying time through, which didn't meet the 107% classification in the sprint race qualifying. And that time from Fernando Alonso would have seen him qualify last on the F2 grid.
Yeah, it's astounding, like just how far behind that Aston Martin car is. Like it just seems to be slipping further and further. Like I think a lot of us were hoping, like with this extra month break, that maybe they could do a bit of work and bring some stuff. And while the cars definitely seem more stable than what they were, performance just isn't there yet.
No, certainly not. And look, there's some glimpses. Their qualifying effort, as I said, was a little bit better. They didn't qualify on the back row of the grid, so that's always positive for them at the moment. It's kind of a bit of a battle to the bottom with those guys and Cadillac, as we've touched on a few times, but reasonably positive. In terms of that main race, I touched on it off the top. The reschedule, there was some pretty horrific weather predicted for what would have been a 6 a.m. Australian Eastern Time start. They pulled it back, pulled it forward 3 hours of the race, and it ended up being 3 a.m., which suits your circadian rhythms a little better than mine, JR. But look, it could be argued that it worked. Whether or not it worked as a result of moving it, or it would have worked either way. But look, there was no weather impact on the race, so that's probably a little bit of a positive. But everyone was braced for this weather chaos still late in the race, and it effectively, we got a few drops on a few helmets. That's about it.
Yeah, it made for an exciting race actually, because there was these threats of like there's weather nearby, and like you can see like just like in terms of the cloud cover and like how dark it got in certain sections of the track, that like the weather was very real. And I believed in the hours leading up to the race there was also some pretty torrential downpours as well. resulting in under some of those underbridges, there was just some standing water, like even when the racing was sort of just beginning. But that said, though, yeah, it didn't actually eventuate. But so that just meant pit stops were sort of more gambles and things like that. It made for a lot more excitement, including some really great strategic play by the Mercedes team.
Yeah, we certainly saw strategy play into this at a few different points, and obviously that paid off. But I guess let's start at the start of the race, and the start, as we've seen a bit of drama. Everyone got away relatively cleanly off the line this time, which might be put down to the changes and the new regulations, or it might just be coincidence. But Charles Leclerc got to the lead briefly. Max Verstappen, honestly, lost control a little of his car, but then managed to control the spin so well to absolutely mitigate the damage. And somehow no one hit him, which was phenomenal to see. There's a little bit of everything in the start. Antonelli looked really mature in terms of how he handled his. As I said, Charles Leclerc got the start, and Max Verstappen did, I don't know if there's another driver on that grid that pulls out of that so cleanly.
Well, we've seen an example much later in the race, someone trying to do the same maneuver and not quite pulling it off. But yeah, he got on the gas far too early coming out of that because he's just keen to get back in front, and it's flicked it around perfectly where he just kept going. And we've seen this from Max before, where he's done he does seem to when he loses the car to get control. And there wasn't any on the radio. There wasn't any whinging from Max. Max was like, "Oh, that was me. Let's move on," and just kept at it for the whole race.
Yes, well, there's a few other drivers that could certainly learn from Max's "oh, that was me" sort of behaviour, and that's probably a nice little segue, whether you intended that or not. We had a couple of early crashes, JR, and Isaac Hadjar probably didn't handle his all that well.
No, Isaac's definitely a man who shows his emotions. This one wasn't so much distraught. This one was just more anger. And I for a few moments there, I thought he was going to punch through a carbon fiber framing of his car. But he was very upset about clipping a previous wall that resulted in a broken steering arm and not being able to sort of pull out of a crash. And in all seriousness, it was more of a kind of light touch to the wall too, that really got him in the end. But yeah, so very, very upset, Isaac. But the real crash, the real dangerous looking crash, was that of Pierre Gasly's, who actually rolled his car as a result of contact with New Zealand's least favourite export, Liam Lawson.
Geez, I reckon Mel Gibson might be in that race. But anyway, and there you go. I didn't think I'd mention Mel Gibson today. But yeah, Liam Lawson, as you said, Pierre Gasly gave him so much space, and Liam Lawson just went, "No, I want less. I want to come and get cozy with you." And it was probably pretty fortunate in the end with the way that Gasly's car got up and over that it ended as well as it did, I guess. Liam Lawson could have had some, bit more weighty consequences, even just in terms of the damage to the other vehicle there.
Yeah, look, it was so when they first showed the television shot of Pierre's car sort of wedged in that wall at an angle, okay, it's he's gone in hard. He didn't actually go into the wall that hard, but he flipped over, which is what caused the attitude of the car.
Yeah, certainly. I guess while we're talking crashes and misfortune, Nico Hulkenberg, a little bit more misfortune. First of all, he lost his nose and had to go and get a nose cone replaced on the first lap. And then his car caught fire. So another retirement for him. He remains the only driver, not counting Cadillac and Aston Martin, not to get a point so far this season.
Yeah, look, he's not having a great run, whereas his teammate actually had a decent bit of a run again, where Gabriel Bortoleto seems to be just pushing that car closer and closer to that top 10, and we're probably going to see some top 10 finishes from the Audis in sooner than later.
Yeah, well, he does have 2 points to his name. As I said, there's a couple of others there, Ocon and Albon, who are very low in the points, but hopefully Hulkenberg can get some reliability out of that vehicle because it's certainly been tough for him. Let's go to the end of the race and talk. You alluded to it before. Charles Leclerc's late spin. It became quite an incident. He obviously then limped the car home, which then got him under review, copped him a 20-second penalty, which pushed him down from 6th, where he finished after some late overtakes by Max Verstappen and George Russell on him. That pushed him then behind Lewis Hamilton and Franco Colapinto. But was this just driver error at JR, or was this Ferrari putting him maybe in a situation where he had to get a little bit too much out of those tyres late? He was under pressure, obviously. Oscar Piastri went past him. And that's where I really feel that the pressure mounted and led to the error. But was this about, he had, I think it was somewhere in the realm of an extra, 10 or 15 laps on those tyres when he was trying to defend late. And, again, hindsight, all those wonderful things. But, is this a little bit Ferrari wearing the blame here? We know they haven't always been the best at strategy.
Look, their strategy, yeah, like I don't think they got it right, and like it's just classic them to not get it right. Like the good example is like where Mercedes chose to bring in Antonelli. Like they brought him in, they got the overcut done, got ahead of Lando, and then like just stayed ahead for the rest of the race. Like there was a little bit of a battle there initially when the race when all the pit stops sort of resolved themselves, I should say, is what I'm looking for. But yeah, Leclerc out there on like very old tires, not as old as Max's. Like Max ran almost like a perfect race again, to be perfectly honest. Like given the problems he'd had at the beginning of the race, including that spin, he didn't come out of that unscathed. He dropped in quite a number of places, but to go in early and do a stop for hards and then just see it through, that there's probably what I think Ferrari wanted to see out of Charles Leclerc. But because of the way the Ferrari is, I think it's just like it's acceleration heavy. It's fast off lines. I think that's where they ran into their issue.
Yeah, I think, it wasn't just a car with no pace. I think it was a result that Ferrari maybe let slip through their fingers. That late overtake, though, from Oscar Piastri was a strong one. And then, as I said, I really felt that's, trying to fight back where Charles had the pressure. And, you have a look at it and a little bit better management. They're finishing third or fourth, not eighth. They finished in sixth and eighth instead of fourth and sixth, which is quite an impact when you have a look at the Constructors' Championship. But it's an interesting one. I think a lot of credit needs to go to Mercedes and Kimi Antonelli, as you said. I touched on it off the top there. First driver in F1 history to convert their first 3 poles all into wins. That's not something to overlook.
No, that's some like Toto Wolff made a bet on this kid, and it's just paying off like 3 times in a row now. It's paid off. I look forward to just seeing George Russell downplay Kimi's achievements the next sort of round of media. But yeah, Kimi should be very proud of what he's done. And like, I don't see it sort of dissipating either. Like if the Mercedes car keeps going the way it's going, Kimi's got the opportunity to make this 4 in a row. And going into Canada in 3 weeks' time, like we're going to see some fireworks there.
Yeah, we certainly are. I mean, he's extended that lead out to 20 points, and then it's another 21 back to Leclerc after that mistake. You then got Lando and Lewis equal. So there's quite a gap starting to open up, not just between Mercedes and the pack, but between Kimi and George. It's starting to get to the point that, any further extension of that, like this weekend, and all of a sudden it's a full race between them. Obviously, a long way to go in the season. We know that. And we're still to see those other rules that will come into force in a few races' time that'll change some of the pieces for the Mercedes. But they might be well out in front by that point. And, it's certainly really interesting. I guess any other key takeaways, JR, in terms of good performers? I think, when we look back at the points from this race and who got it done, there's probably a mention for Franco Colapinto. He's slid his way up there into 7th in the end with the adjustment on Leclerc. So, yeah, certainly positive. And Alex Albon in the points as well.
Yeah, look, again, positive moves from the Alpine team. That Mercedes engine is working for them. And they're sort of pulling results together. Like I would have liked to have seen where Gasly could have got that car had he not been so harshly taken out of the race by a driver who doesn't deserve his spot anymore.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what comes of it. The only karma out of that was, at least I was fearing at first when that crash happened, that Liam was somehow going to utilise his Teflon skin that he seems to have and just cruise on into the race and keep going and cop a 10-second penalty, which, probably realistically, based on what we're seeing from the RB team, probably just meant that, he finished 10 seconds closer to Fernando Alonso rather than, beating him by 30 seconds. He beat him by 20 or something like that. So, I think there's some positives to take for a few of the teams. I think the fact that for the Aston Martins, they were only 1 lap down is actually a weird little positive for them as well.
And both cars finished as well. So like that there's actually like a start. There was no weird stopping them like for extended periods of time and putting them back out there. Like the car seems to be race stable at this stage. So ideally, like we'll start seeing some performance start to appear out of that Aston Martin, but it's going to be too little too late at this stage. Like their season's cooked already, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's very much how they structure towards 2027. 2 points finishes for Williams, which is a good result by their standards, considering the start of the year they've had as well.
That's right. Like Williams is sort of easing back into that sort of position that they've been holding like these last couple of years, like consistent points sort of getters. So like everything's sort of starting to fall into place now.
Well, we can't wait to see what comes from here. But it was an interesting race, plenty of peculiarities with the reschedule. But Miami does give us a very clear picture of where F1 sits right now. Antonelli and Mercedes, the benchmark. McLaren are closing, but is it going to be enough to hurt them? Piastri, well, he's starting to stack some meaningful results after that very slow start with the DNFs at the start of the year. Ferrari, well, they showed that they could be a danger, JR, but the consistency and execution is going to be their biggest question mark.
Yeah, that Ferrari, like if they can make the car that starts the races, the car that finishes the races, that's going to be the world of good for them. Like we've seen what that Ferrari can do off the line. They just need to figure out how to translate that to still staying in front as well.
They certainly do. Well, JR, as always, great to have you on. Looking forward to getting into Canada in a few weeks' time. And, great to have your insights.
There as well, Chris.
Well, that is it. We've got 3 weeks until Canada now. That makes this Miami result sit even more heavily. Antonelli will get 3 more weeks at the top of the tree. McLaren and Ferrari get 3 weeks to think about what got away, and Red Bull, they get 3 weeks to find answers. Canada becomes a massive pressure point, and as always, we'd love to have you along for the ride. So make sure to hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel, and hit that bell icon down below. And that way you'll stay up to date with each and every time we drop a Formula One video. But we wait now for Canada, 3 weeks away, and until then, we look to return with another F1 Daily in the lead-up.